Good afternoon, students, and this is going to be my very last live lecture of 2021. And next week I'll just do a short Christmas, Merry Christmas kind of thing, and it will be a lot more like a chat thing. So this week, this will be my last formal lecture. And so for week 11, all you have to do is just do your week 11 forum and post your rough draft for your essay 2, for your comparison contrast essay. And also remember to include your APA in-text, at least one APA in-text citation and at least one APA reference citation. And most of you are doing really well in your essay structure, and you just have to replace you and your for with a person, because it makes you sound more professional and credible. And also you can hand in the very last day of this class is going to be December 23rd, midnight Pacific, and then December 24th, 3 a.m. Eastern. So that's going to be the very last time or day that you can hand in your assignments. After that time, all the zeros become permanent. And all classes at Fortress College will end on December 23rd, midnight Pacific time, December 24th, 3 a.m. So everything will be done, and then you'll be done with this class. Now, if you want to avoid the holiday rush, you can hand in your assignments in week 12 early, like on Monday or Tuesday, or even Sunday. And I will grade early for this time, because it's the holidays and everybody wants to be able to, by Thursday, be with their family and celebrate the holidays. So this time I will grade early so that everybody can do that. So this week, I'm going to discuss how to write a science paper. Before I do that, so week 11 is now the last stage of the writing process. So the first 2 stages we did in week 7 and 8, pre-writing in the week 7 forum, and then we wrote our rough draft in the week 8 when we did the worksheet, the outline. And now we're in the rewriting stage, which is the last stage, where you rewrite your paper and revise it. You put it into rough draft, everyone looks at it, gives you feedback, and then you hand in your final draft for week 12, which then finishes the entire writing process for essay 2. And so we're in the last stage of the second essay for this class. And so I hope that you all enjoyed this class. I hope you all enjoyed my pictures. I really enjoy making the pictures, actually, and I enjoy helping you. And if you're still having trouble with the credible sources worksheet, you could still email me before December 23rd, midnight Pacific, and still hand it in. So you can always email me and I can answer your questions. Now, so with today's presentation, my very last presentation, I promise, of this class, we're going to do how to write a science paper. Okay, so that would be today's lesson. And so when we write a science paper or read a science paper, either or, we need to understand the structure of the science paper. So it makes it easier for us to either write the science paper or read the science paper. And so before I start my science paper presentation, I will give you a few pointers on how you can do your week 11 forum. This will be our last peer review forum. This week, we are on I just said all of this, we are on the last stage of the writing process, rewriting. Remember, the writing process involves pre-writing, week 7 and 8 assignments, writing, in which you convert your outline to the rough draft, and rewriting, week 11 forum, and in week 12, you will submit your final draft of essay 2. For your week 11 forum, you will post the rough drafts of your last essay to the assignment tab. Well, actually, to the, sorry, it's to the forum. You do it to the forum. You actually have no writing assignment this week. You just have your week 11 forum. Make sure you include the corrections and feedback from students in your final draft, or you will lose points. Post early to get the most feedback. The last two stages of the rewriting process is revision, in which you check for the essay structure, and proofreading, where you check for grammar and punctuation errors. We always revise or check for essay structure before we proofread, check for grammar. You always want to make sure your essay makes sense to the reader. Then, after you know your essay structure is good, then you proofread for grammar errors. Have someone you trust who is good at English look over your paper. You can also upload your paper to Smart Thinking tutoring service and give them 24 hours to respond to edit your paper. You can take a break from your paper by taking a walk to clear the cobwebs before correcting your paper. Read your paper backwards. I've never tried this one. Try out Grammarly, which is a free automated grammar checker that checks for grammar. Or you can schedule, well, it's too late this term to schedule a Zoom session with me. So why do we revise for our paper first? Well, that way we know that the paper makes sense. So when we do our peer review tips, you would ask yourself, does the other student's paper have a thesis statement that summarizes the content of their body paragraph? Does the thesis express the main idea of their paper? Do the 3 reasons of their thesis become their body paragraphs? You could also, as you look over your paper, use this as your revision list to make sure that your paper has good essay structure. After you make sure you have good essay structure, make sure you have good grammar, So do you have sentence variety? Did you replace all of the you and your with a person? Did you avoid comma splices and fused sentences? Are your paragraphs each 5 to 7 sentences? Did you remember to include an APA in-text citation and an APA reference citation? Did you indent 5 spaces for the first line of every paragraph? Did you remember to double space your paper, have a title page, and have Times New Roman size 12 font? And did you use transition words? If you did, then you have a very good essay. Once you finish revising and proofreading your paper, you can then upload your paper to the week 12 final draft assignment well, in this case, you could do it as early as you can because we've got Christmas coming up. And so you're almost done with this class. Congratulations on making it this far and finishing this class. Now I'm going to begin my how to write a science paper presentation. The reason why I decided to do a presentation on how to write a science paper is that when you are taking your other nursing classes, you are most likely going to be reading scholarly papers or scholarly science papers written by other scientists, talking about the different nursing and medical issues that you need to know for your nursing degree. Most and all nursing papers and science papers are all written pretty much the same way. When you read the little abstracts or blurbs, summaries in the online library, you are reading what's called an abstract. So when a person writes a science paper, like in my case, an abstract summarizes the entire paper. It summarizes not only the problem, but also the solution. Remember that a science paper is very similar to a problem, solution, persuasion paper. Just like a business proposal is also where you state the first half of the paper, you state the problem, and then the second half of the paper, you state the solution. So that is a problem solution paper. And that format is used when you write a science paper. And so that problem solution. And so usually when you write a science paper, when I wrote my science paper, you write the abstract last. After you've done the entire paper, then you summarize what you did. And that is what you read, that summary or abstract is what you read in your online library or in Google Scholar, okay? So in my case, when I wrote my master's thesis, I wrote my abstract last. I wrote a social science paper. So once you understand the structure of a science paper, you'll be able to understand and better read scholarly sources in the online library. B, as you proceed with your college degree, you will be asked to write a science paper yourself. In other words, especially as you get to the third year or the fourth year of college. Not so much in the first and second year, because in the first and second year of college, it's more about foundational knowledge, where you read other people's papers and write a report based on other people's papers. Then by the time you get to the third and fourth year, you get to write your papers. Okay, and then the higher you go, the more original your paper becomes, the more important your paper becomes, the higher you go in education. Right now, you're at the stage where you're reading other people's science papers in order to learn the beginning and the basics of your nursing degree or of whatever degree you're going after. So I remember the first 2 years when I went to school, all I did was read other people's articles and then summarize what other people had already written. Later on, you get to write your stuff after learning what other people have already done, so you don't reinvent the wheel. So without further ado, how to write a science paper. And so in this presentation, I'm going to go over what is a research question, the scientific method, parts of a science paper. Then I'm going to go over the different parts of what constitutes a science paper, the title, the abstract, background and purpose. In other words, first you state the problem. So you have to have the background and purpose of the problem. Then you write the solution, in which you write out how did you find the solution to the problem. After you state the problem and the background and purpose, then in methods, results, and conclusion, that's where you write the solution to the problem. How do we cure the disease? How do we solve the problem? So first, that's why when we write a problem solution paper, the first half of the paper, we state what the problem is or what the research question is, okay? Then you write the solution to that research question. All right, so here's what we have. So how to plan your research paper, or how to plan, first you store, just like with the writing process we did with our essays, you storyboard your ideas. You can draw out your ideas or map out your ideas on PowerPoint. Make a vision statement. In other words, what exactly are you researching? What exactly do you want to know? Then what is your research question? Okay, and so this is similar to the pre-writing stage of an academic paper, where you want to choose the topic and write an outline. So you want to develop your research question. In other words, what is it are you going to research? And so this usually takes a lot of time to decide what I'm going to research. In my case, I remember I attended a lot of classes. I listened to a lot of professors, and then each professor said, are you interested in writing a paper about one of my research topics? So I took a lot of classes, and then I listened to all the professors, and then until I found a topic I was interested in. So that's how you do it in graduate school. So the answer to this research question becomes the topic of your science paper. So the research question is the hypothesis of your study. It's the topic, just like the topic of your essay. So the research question could be, what is the cure for COVID-19? What is the cure for name that ailment? And what treatments, what can I do to, so that would be an example of a research question. What is the cure for cancer? Or how can I test for cancer early so that the patient can get know that they have cancer early on? So how do you test early for pancreatic cancer, for instance? Okay, so that would be your research question, okay? Then the answer to that research question becomes your thesis statement, just like the answer to what is gun control or something like that, or why do I want to become a nurse, okay? That's the research question. And then the answer to that research question becomes your thesis statement or hypothesis. The very heart of science is to find evidence for the claim you are making. Science is a process by which you prove your claim to the world through observation, tests, and results. When you create a science experiment, you want answers and credible results to your research question. You want credible evidence for your hypothesis. The experiment is the means by which you create that evidence through the results of your experiment. You either affirm your claim or disaffirm your claim, and it takes time to gather data. The results of the data changes over time. So to be a scientist, you need to be patient and gather your results and data to prove your claim. So if, let's say I have a hypothesis, my hypothesis is COVID-19 may or may not be cured by a vaccine. COVID-19 may be cured by taking a pill. COVID-19 may be cured by taking some kind of medication. And so there you have a whole series of hypotheses. Okay, hypothesis means that you have a claim, but you don't quite know what the answer to that claim is. And so then you have to do experiments. You give a lot of people vaccines, or you give a lot of people pills. And then you have to sit back and look at your data to see which statement is correct. A, COVID-19 is cured by vaccine. B, COVID-19 can be cured by antiviral pills. Or C, none of the above. And so then you have to sample a lot of people. Okay, so that's the research question. That's the problem, is the COVID-19. The solution would be the cure. How do we go about that cure? That's where the experimentation comes in. So some people are going to vaccinate a lot of people. Other people are going to create antiviral pills. Yet other people will create other means, such as the plasma, okay? Having people who have already had COVID-19 and they have them donate their plasma to COVID-19 patients. Which treatment is going to give the cure for COVID-19? Which is the most effective treatment? And then all the different scientists has to experiment. And then you have to wait on the data. So that's called methods, in which you, and then you have to prove your claim. Let's say and so you make a claim and you have evidence to back your claim, just like when you write a paper. The scientific method is defined as a method of research in which a problem is identified, relevant data is gathered, the hypothesis is formulated from this data, and the hypothesis is empirically tested. In simple terms, the scientific method is a way for scientists to study and learn things. Science focuses on measured observation aimed at understanding a topic or research problem. Experiments are set up to test a hypothesis about why things happen. Experimental results agree or disapprove or disagree with your hypothesis. So the scientific method doesn't have to be something global as big as COVID-19. It could also be how to bandage your, the best way to treat your patient is to put bandage A, new skin, on the wound. Or the best way to cure the wound is to suture it, which is the best way. And so that would be the problem, how to suture or heal a wound. And then the solution would be all of these experiments. Should I just put new skin bandage on it? Do I put a regular Band-Aid on it? Or do I just suture it? Okay, and then all of these people, you do the experiment. So the second half of your science paper will deal with what is the solution. Okay, so that's basically, so science is when you look for that solution. You make a claim, and then you have an experiment to prove that claim is correct or not correct. So your thesis statement, hypothesis, is a testable theory. In other words, should I be using the Band-Aid? Should I be using new skin? Or should I be suturing that wound? So it's testable by having the experiment. So you conduct an experiment to see if the hypothesis is true or false. So your hypothesis is like a working thesis statement for your paper. Steps of the scientific method: ask a question, make an observation, create a hypothesis, make a prediction based on the hypothesis, test the prediction of the hypothesis, and use the results to make a new hypothesis and new predictions. So if I create a hypothesis such as COVID-19 can be cured by having everyone take a vaccine, or so that could be right or wrong. COVID-19 can be cured by everyone having natural immunity. That can be right or wrong. And so it's all about asking that question, how can COVID-19 be cured? That's the research question. Then the hypothesis is your prediction on how you think the problem can be solved. And so some people, so you might think COVID-19 can be cured by getting a vaccine. Then another scientist might think COVID-19 can be cured by taking antiviral pills early on in the infection. And yet another person, scientist, would think COVID-19 can be cured by taking the blood of former COVID-19 patients, okay? So you have three different scientists, three different studies, okay? And each person creates a hypothesis. They make an observation, create a hypothesis, then they have to test it out and to see which one works. So what makes a good scientific paper? The author should write a paper in a way that makes the greatest impact on its readers, such as writing an article that describes the major finding of the article and writing the article in a language that is as clear as possible. So after you finish your experiment and you have your results, so let's say you finish the experiment and you realize that the best way to heal a wound is to put new skin onto the wound. That's the fastest way. And then you have to write results, then real world applications. What is the real world application of your experiment is to tell all your patients you should use new skin on, that's a liquid Band-Aid, on to suture to heal a wound, for instance. And then you would write an article for Time magazine so that everybody can know about it. So that's what makes a good scientific paper, and that you write about what your results were so that everybody can know your results of your study and they can apply those results to the real world. There are two kinds of research. You've got qualitative research and quantitative research. Qualitative research is when you describe what you find in your research. And quantitative research is when you use numbers. That's to describe the results of your study. So two different ways to describe the results of your study. Qualitative, using words, quantitative, using numbers. And so if I were to say 78% of Americans are obese, that's quantitative research because I'm using numbers to describe my research or results. If I simply say the majority of Americans are obese, that's qualitative research because I'm describing the results of my experiment using words, no numbers. So you have two kinds of research, qualitative research and quantitative research. And when I was writing my research paper, I did both. I wrote out the numerical results of my experiment, which was quantitative research. And then I described what those numbers meant, and that became qualitative research. So qualitative research involves collecting and analyzing numerical data to understand concepts, opinions, or experiments. There are 5 common approaches to qualitative research. Grounded theory involves collecting data in order to develop new theories. Ethnography involves immersing yourself in a group or organization to understand its culture. Narrative research involves interpreting stories to understand how people make sense of their experiences and perceptions. Phenomenological research involves investigating phenomenon through people's lived experiences. Action research links theory and practice in several cycles to drive innovative changes. The easiest one to understand is ethnography. Ethnography means that you go off and live in the culture of what you're researching in order to find your results. The easiest one to understand is Jane Goodall. And so Jane Goodall went and immersed herself with a bunch of gorillas in order to understand the culture of how gorillas live and behave. And then she described to the world how gorillas live and behave and how they form a group. Okay, that's qualitative research, where she would say in the gorilla group, it is the male gorilla, okay, who decides where everybody goes. And then the two most dominant male gorillas fight each other for dominance in the tribe or family of that gorilla group. And then the alpha male gorilla that wins the fight gets to keep gets all the females and gets to impregnate all those females, okay, female gorillas, and you kick off the other male who has to go off and find his own troop of females. That's how that whole explanation of gorilla behavior is known as qualitative research. You notice that in all of that paragraph, I didn't once use a number. So that's when you describe what you see. You describe the results, in words, the results of your study. And so if you Google Jane Goodall, she is the queen of qualitative research of gorillas. Quantitative research means collecting numerical data to describe characteristics, find correlations, or test hypotheses. In other words, quantitative research is when you crunch numbers, okay? Percentages, you use population numbers, you use like 500, how many people? 250 million people live in the United States, for instance. That's quantitative research. 78% of Americans are obese, as in fat. That's quantitative research, okay? The average American only makes $13.50. And you need to make at least $45 an hour in order to be able to afford, say, an apartment, in order to be afford, to have at least make ends meet, like break even. It's $45 an hour. Anything underneath, and that doesn't work. Okay, so that is quantitative research because I'm using numbers to back up my hypothesis. And so quantitative research, that is numbers, are used in survey research, descriptive research, and experimental research. Survey research is the most elementary tool for all sorts of quantitative research techniques. So when you watch any newscast, they're going to say President Biden's approval poll or approval rating is now at 35%. And so by using the number 35%, that's known as a survey research. In other words, they would ask people, how satisfied are you with the president's performance on the economy, for instance? And then you would have 37% approve and about 65% or 63% disapprove. So that's known as quantitative. When you're crunching numbers, that's known as quantitative research. Descriptive research seeks to explain the current status of an identified variable. The aim of descriptive research is to explain, interpret the current status of settings, conditions, or events. In other words, let's say I take a survey. I have all of these numbers. Now I've got to explain, what do those numbers mean, And so then if I say 75, instead I would say 75% of people disapprove of, 65% of people disapprove of the president's performance, while only 35%. So as soon as I try to describe what my numbers mean, that's known as descriptive research, in which you try to explain what your numbers mean. It's also known as qualitative research. There is an overlap, okay? Anytime you describe something in words, but you're interpreting your numbers, and so descriptive research and then qualitative research overlap. There's a lot of qualitative research, in other words, in which you describe something in words, overlap with descriptive and experimental research, okay? Experimental research, as the name suggests, is usually based on one or more theories. It is based on one, in other words, before you do the experiment, you predict what the outcome is going to be. You predict the hypothesis, and then you do an experiment based on your prediction to see if your prediction is right or wrong. That's called experimental research, okay? Because you want to establish a cause and effect relationship. So if I say, for example, my hypothesis is, for example, COVID-19 can be cured by vaccines. So that could be my hypothesis. Now I want to test my theory by giving everyone a vaccine, sitting back and wait to see if the number of COVID cases drop and if people can actually, get herd immunity and COVID-19 is gone or history. Or another hypothesis could be COVID-19 can be cured by taking antiviral pills early on in the infection. Then you sit back and you see a lot of people take the antiviral pills and you see if your hypothesis is true or false. And so when you want to test the trueness or the falseness of your hypothesis, that's known as experimental research. Why do we need sampling in research? Well, the bigger the sampling, in other words, the more people who participate in your study, the more reliable your results. So let's take COVID-19, for instance. If only one person, you experiment only on one person or only on one group of people, like 5 people, that's not very good. Whereas if you experiment on an entire country or several countries, then you tell other countries, well, so this country, I think that when we did COVID-19, we keep saying Israel, the whole country of Israel, after they vaccinated 40% of their population, they saw their COVID cases drop. So an entire country was used as sampling to make that hypothesis correct. That is, the hypothesis would be giving 40 or 50% of the population a COVID vaccine would have COVID cases fall down, go decline. So if you only did it for 2 people, then the results are not as reliable. So in any study that you do, the bigger the sampling, the more reliable the results. So I remember when I was at UCLA and our professor kept saying the word sampling, sampling, sampling. What he was teaching us that when we write our science papers and when we write when we do our experiments, we have to have large sampling, as in large numbers, and that the more people we ask our survey, the more reliable our answers are. The more people we vaccinate, the more reliable our vaccine results are. So more is better. Okay, so the size of our sample dictates the amount of information we have, and therefore in part determines our precision of level of confidence that we have in our results or sample estimates. An estimate always has an associated level of uncertainty, which depends upon the underlying variability of the data, as well as, in other words, there's always a margin of error. So the more people that participate, the bigger the sampling in your study, the smaller the margin of error becomes. In other words, the smaller the mistakes are. So you always have to have a lot of people in your study so that your results are reliable, and so that your study is reliable and for people to believe you. One of the most important features of a scientific research paper is that the research must be replicable, which means that the paper gives readers enough detailed information that the research can be repeated or replicated. Replicability keeps researchers honest and can give readers confidence in research. So what does that mean? What's replicability mean? It means that other scientists can repeat the results of your experiment. So let's say that I have a COVID-19 vaccine, and I say that this vaccine is safe for the general population. And so I tested it on country A. Now country B, C, and D will conduct their own vaccine trials, and they have to be able to replicate your results that it's safe. In other words, that everybody is cured of COVID-19. And if everybody gets the same cure results, then that makes your study valid. If only you have the cure and only you're able to cure using your vaccine and it only cures people in your country, but not in other countries, that means there was something wrong with your experiment. Because a valid experiment means that the same results has to occur wherever you are, whoever you are, so that the same vaccine has to be able to cure everybody, not just group A, not group B. And so therefore, the way in which you can tell that a study is valid is when you can replicate or duplicate the same results in other populations or in other studies. So the two things that make a study valid: big sampling, in other words, having a lot of people in the study, and number two, replicability, that you can replicate those results from country to country, from person to person. And so that's how you can tell if a study is valid. What are the parts of a science paper? And so the basic parts of a science paper, whether you're writing a social science paper, a business paper, a science proposal, a business proposal, pretty much the same format. And so I did this similar format when I did the business communications presentation, where I presented the different parts of a business proposal, where I said that a business proposal is basically a problem solution paper. And that's very similar to the third persuasive essay, which is known as the problem solution persuasive essay. So we're going to use the same problem solution paper in our science paper. And so now I'm going to go over part by part the different parts of a science paper. So you have the title, then you have the abstract, which is a 2-paragraph summary of everything that you did in your experiment. And the abstract comes before the first page. Okay, so you have your title page, then you have the next page is a 2-paragraph summary, and then you have your paper. That's how it looks. And then at the very beginning of page 1 of your science paper, you're going to state the problem. Then you're going to state the background and purpose. That's one heading, okay, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs. Then you're going to have another heading, literature review. This means all of the references and all of the articles that you read for this paper. And then you get, so all of this title, abstract, background, and purpose, this whole first 4, let's see if this works, all states the problem. So the first 4 are all stating the problem. You state the background of the problem, you state the purpose of the experiment, you state what you read, what references you read. And now in methods, results, discussion, and conclusion, in this part of the paper, you're going to discuss the solution, okay, problem solution. So methods, so under methods, you're going to tell the reader exactly what you did to do in your experiment. So you would say, I polled 100 people in the town of Texas, and I asked them the question, do you approve or disapprove of the president's performance? So that would be methods, okay? In other words, how did you conduct your experiment? Or you would say, I gave a vaccine shot to men, women, children, different ethnic groups to ascertain the side effects of COVID-19 and to see if my vaccine or antiviral pill or medicine will have side effects or is effective in curing COVID-19. So that's going to be your methods. Okay, then results. After conducting my experiment, the results of my experiment says that, all right, and then my vaccine doesn't have to be COVID-19, it could be whatever vaccine is effective, like the smallpox vaccine is very effective in getting rid of smallpox, for instance, or this particular medicine, antiviral pill, is very effective in getting rid of this virus. Okay, so those will be the results. And in your results, you would say 75% of people showed such and such a side effect. Well, while 25% of people showed no side effects. So those are all your results. Okay, so methods is what you did. I polled 100 people, asked them a question, or I gave 100 people a shot. The results would be 50% claim that they love the president's performance. The other 50% and 40% can't make up their mind. 10% have no clue what's going on. So you have results. Then you have discussion and conclusion. Usually these are together. How can you use the results in the real world? And so then in the real world, you would say, wow, this president has such low approval rating, he's not going to be reelected. So people start making predictions based on the results. Or such and such a treatment is effective. We should give such and such a vaccine to everybody. And then for conclusion, further research needs to be done to ascertain for COVID-19, further research needs to be done to see what long COVID is, or what will COVID look like in 5 to 10 years, or how will the Omicron variant, is that going to be very, very, is that going to be mild? And are all the other variants going to get weaker or stronger? So in the conclusion, you write what other studies need to be done for the future. And that pretty much wraps up your entire paper, your science paper. I just simply orally did a science paper for you, okay? All the different structures. It's not very hard. The basic structure is very easy to understand. So let's go through the very first part of the science paper. So the very first part of the science paper is the title includes the main variables, the setting, the design of the experiment. The title should capture the essence of the paper. If someone was interested in your topic, what phrase or keywords would they type into a search engine? Make sure those words are included in your title. So the title of your science paper should encapsulate the very essence of your paper. And so, and sometimes people use for their title their research question. So they would say, is the Pfizer vaccine safe? Is the Merck antiviral pill safe? So a lot of times somebody's title of their paper is the research question. The abstract. So the abstract of the science paper, it comes right before the first page of your paper. And the abstract is 1 or 2 paragraphs that summarize the whole experiment. When you go to a database in your online library, you are reading summaries or abstracts of someone's experiment. Normally, an abstract is created after the experiment has been done, where the researcher summarizes the purpose, the methods, and the results of his experiment. The abstract is the elevator pitch for his article. Most abstracts are 100 to 300 words long, which translates into 10 to 20 sentences. Like any good elevator pitch, it should describe the importance of the field, the challenge that their research addresses, how their research solves the challenge, and its potential impact. It should include quantitative and qualitative results. That is important to remember. And so if you go to Google Scholar, then that's all a bunch of abstracts. In other words, summaries of people's experiments or science papers. And also in Google Scholar, you don't have to bother to do kapow. Everything in Google Scholar is already peer-reviewed and already credible. But if you use Google, then you can get ads, you get everything. Then you have to use kapow to see if that source is credible or not. And we never use Wikipedia. I have to say that over and over again, because that anybody can upload anything to Wikipedia. So we don't use Wikipedia for our paper. So next, after you write the abstract, you write the background and purpose of the problem. Remember that when we write a science paper, the first half of the science paper is just writing about what is the research problem? What is the research? What are you researching? What's your topic? So in the background and purpose, the researcher talks about why his research topic is important or relevant. The researcher builds a convincing argument for the merit of his research problem. He indicates the scope of research And this can include a literature review or methods. And in the literature review, the scientist reads many articles about his topic to see where the topic fits in the niche of other research. From these articles, the scientist formalizes his thesis statement that he wants to test. He gets an idea of what kind of research has been already done on his topic. In the methods section, the researcher describes the research. In other words, he describes what he's going to do for his experiment. He's going to describe his research. He's going to describe design, his theoretical framework, sample key variables, instruments used to collect data, data analysis of all the sections of a science paper. The methods section is the most important because this is the section that other scientists are going to read to try to replicate your experiment. And if they cannot replicate your experiment by following your methods section word per word, then your whole study goes down the toilet along with your reputation as a scientist. So many scientists, even though this is the easiest section to write, it's also the most important section to get correct. And so here, any results in your paper should be replicable based on the methods section. So if you've developed an entirely new experimental method, you have to write out in excruciating detail, including setup, control, protocol, manufacturers, part numbers. Then you have to write exactly everything you did so somebody else can duplicate it to make sure your results are replicable. Okay, remember, replicability and sampling are the two major criteria to see if your study is worthy of anything. If not, you're all downhill. Your name is equal fraud. So if you're building on a previous study, there's no need to repeat all those details. That's what references are for. That's why we have a references section. Methods. You tell what materials were needed to be used in your, so here, this is the different parts of methods. First, you state your materials, like what did you use? Then you write about procedure. In other words, I did a poll, or I did an analysis. I wrote a paper. I injected a lot of people with vaccines, and 50% white people, 50% Black people, 10% Native Americans, and the breakdown of 80% male, 20% female. In other words, who did you inject people with? So that's also part of methods, and that's not the results. That's part of your methods and materials of who you did it on and who you know, just like if I were to do, when I did my master's, I had to write, I used book A and book B, and I looked at video A and video B. And then I had to name which books and which videos I used in my experiment. So this is what you call materials and procedure. Now, this is the interesting part. Most people skip, they just read the back, never mind. So results. So after you do your experiments, you have your results, okay? And so the results section, oh, okay, so I actually got somebody here. So the results section, so who is it that's here? I can't even see who's here. You wanna unmute yourself? Okay, so I'm on the results section of the science paper. The results section of the science paper lists the key findings of your experiment. So you're gonna see live? Hold on.
Move, I can't see.
You can't see what? You can't see my, can you see my
Cool.
Oh no, baby, just see this.
Hey Ashley, how are you doing?
Oh,
You good? Can you see my screen?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yes. So
Okay.
how long have you been listening? Did you listen to the whole thing, or you just here for the last?
Well, I was on and then my computer said I needed to do a Zoom update, and so it kicked me off, but I'm back.
Oh, good to have you back. So I'm going to go through this lecture, and then if you still have problems, I don't think you had any problems with your credible sources, did you?
No.
Okay.
Other than I think you mentioned my referencing.
Right. Whatever you do, don't mention your grades because we're being recorded. but you can mention anything else. Don't say, for example, I got a such and such a grade, or I flunked or did great. You can't say that in public because of privacy issues and stuff like that.
Right.
So you can say anything else about references, or I need to work on my you and your. That's okay to mention your grammar mistakes, okay, for some reason. So I'm getting to the good part of the science paper. Do you find this interesting to learn about science papers?
I do. I like science, even though I'm kind of struggling right now in biology.
Yeah, right now you're at the very beginning of your major. And so the first 2 years of school, you're not actually writing science papers, you're reading other people's science papers. And so the first 2 years of school, college, you have to learn how to read someone's science paper and learn how to understand someone's science paper. So, and then later in the last 2 years of school, you get to write your science papers. So it's just like when you first have to learn to read, you have to learn to read the alphabet and first learn how to read words. That's where you are at in your major. You're learning to read the alphabet and the words. Later, you get to write your own stuff and then make your name and your reputation. That's how it works. By the 5th year, it's all on you to make sure your experiment is valid, you see. And
Yes.
so what year are you in? First or second?
First.
First. So you're reading other people's papers. And so when a scientist gets to the results section of his science paper, he has to list the key findings of his experiment. And the key findings and its implications are focused in this section. If your study was quantitative, then list the significant results such as percentages and statistics. Avoid making vague statements. Provide specific data-driven findings from your experiment. So if I said 75% of people approve of President X, 25% of people disapprove of President X's performance on immigration or on economy, that would be an example of results. Someone did it. So methods would be someone conducted a poll. Results, 75% liked the president and 25% disliked the president. And then in discussion, how are we going to apply these results to the real world? Well, if you got only a 25% approval rate, discussion in the real world, unlikely you're going to be reelected in the next election. Unlikely your party is going to be reelected in the next election. And so if the people who are against you, your critiques are all going to be, yay, you did so badly in the polls, you're not going to be reelected. So all the president's critics are going to be so happy that the president, so that would be discussion, okay? So in the discussion section, or if you're a scientist, you declare my treatment is safe and effective, or my vaccine, or my antiviral pill, or whatever it is that you're experimenting on can be used in the general population. So that would be discussion, it's real world implications. And then conclusion, what other research needs to be done? And so for COVID-19, everybody has to research what are the long-term effects of COVID-19? Are we going to forever be in a pandemic? How about the variants? Or is it just going to peter out and be nothing? So the conclusion focuses on the future of what goes beyond your experiment. And so that concludes all the different parts of your science paper. Then the very end of your science paper, just like with your essay, you list your references, okay? Just like the references, and you use APA. I think I forgot to mention that throughout for science, social sciences, and business, you will be using APA, okay? Unless your field has something even more specific. I know that doctors have yet another research notation system they have to learn. Lawyers do too, and so do journalists. And so every field has its own APA. Just like for literature, like English teachers have to learn MLA. So everybody's got their, and history teachers have Chicago Tribune, I forgot, Turabian, that's a Turabian. So APA is not the only notation system, okay? It's just one of many, just so you know. So if you switch fields, you'll have to learn another notation system. That's how it works. Anyway, and so tables. So this is all your appendix, tables, references. So if you have tables and graphs, you would make a list of tables and graphs at the very end. This is your list of figures. You make a list of sources where you got your statistics, percentages. This is similar to your references. This whole last part are all your references, your appendices. And so what is the writing process of writing a science paper? It's just like doing just like writing an essay. You have the pre-writing, the writing, and the post-writing. Post-writing is also known as rewriting. Stage 3 has so many different names. It can be either post-writing or rewriting. So you have to have your vision statement. What will you research? What are you going to write your paper on? Storyboarding. So storyboarding means that you draw pictures of what your paper is going to look like, kind of like outline. Then methods in which you're going to write, how am I going to prove my statement? So first you have your vision statement. If I were to say, ailment A can be cured by vaccine B, or if I say that cancer can be cured by having a blood injection, I could a cancer test by drawing someone's blood. So that would be a vision test. Then you actually have to method sections when you actually test it out to see if your hypothesis is true or false. And so can COVID-19 be cured by a vaccine? And then you have to, in your methods section, then you would test a whole bunch of people with your vaccine to see if your vaccine works. Results, your vaccine is 95% effective. Conclusion and discussion. Now we can use our vaccine in the general population. So do you see how the science paper works? In other words, you have your hypothesis, you test your hypothesis, make sure your hypothesis is valid, and then you apply that hypothesis to the general population. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then you have background and purpose and literature review, and you write your summary last, believe it or not. So when I did my master's thesis, this is after 5 years of college. Was it 6 years of college? Yeah, 6 years of college. It was after 6 years of college. And then in the 6th year, we wrote our master's thesis. And I remember writing my abstract last. That's kind of like when you go for your master's in nursing. And that's similar to being a nurse practitioner. That's the doctor that works at the CVS Minute Clinic. And everybody goes there for she's treated like a regular doctor over there. So that's the equivalent of 5 years of nursing school. I read that on nursesjournal.org or something. Are you going to go for your nurse's practitioner, your NP?
I think I want to get my feet wet a little bit, doing nursing, and then possibly eventually going to do my NP. My mom has done nursing for about 16 years now, and she's recently decided she wants to go back to school and get her NP. So,
and then if you work for a Minute Clinic, you get to be treated like a real doctor. You know, you get to prescribe everything. People look at you with such awe, like, really? Is that how I do that? Oh, okay, doctor. You know, and people will actually call you doctor, you know. So being an NP at Minute Clinic is, at least according to that nurse, much less stressful, she said, than when she used to work in an ER, is what she said.
I can imagine.
She was saying that she was working in an ER with COVID patients until she switched jobs to this full-time Minute Clinic, where you have people are not yet so sick with COVID, they're just coming in for their shot, you see. So she said it's a lot less stressful. Anyway, so here's an example of a science paper, believe it or not. So is Coke or Pepsi the better drink? And so the scientific method is not just used in science. The scientific method in which you create a hypothesis and then you test your hypothesis to see if it's true or false is used in business and marketing and in everywhere. So here is an example, marketing using the scientific method. And so here's the easy example science paper. So vision statement and research question. Which product is better, Coke or Pepsi? So that's your research question. And then here, background and purpose. A small store in Texas wants to know which drink to stock, Coke or Pepsi, as they have limited shelf space. They ask a local marketing company to ask a random sampling of local people which drink they like best, Coke or Pepsi. And then based on this survey, if a lot of people say they like Coca-Cola, then this store is going to stock a lot of Coca-Cola. If a lot of people say they prefer Pepsi, then this store is going to stock a lot of Pepsi. So that's going to be the real world implication of this study. And so here, that's the background and purpose. So that's the beginning of your science paper. Methods. The marketing firm hired by the Texas store owners telephoned and surveyed 100 people in the Texas area and asked the residents, which drink do you like best, Coke or Pepsi? And then results, 75% of people said they like Coke, 25% of people said they like Pepsi. And so that would be the results. And when I say the numerical results, that's quantitative research. And when I try to interpret those results, when I say something like most people like Coke, but only a minority of people like Pepsi, then I'm going into qualitative research, okay? So that's the difference between quantitative research and qualitative research. And so you can do either one when you write your results. Most people do both. And so here is an example of my research methods. That's my master's thesis. So the use of scripted and non-scripted video in foreign language teaching. And so since you're not a linguist, I have to tell you what scripted means, what is non-scripted in foreign language teaching. Just like y'all have to write out your RN, LN, and in the beginning of your paper. Wow, did you hear that, the horn?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the way from California, you can hear some idiot honking their horn. Anyway, so the use of scripted. Okay, so what I did was there are two ways. So here I'm giving the background and purpose to my paper. So let me forward this. And this is my abstract. So I wrote a summary of my entire paper. So in my paper, what is a better way to teach foreign language? Is it a better way is for people to watch television? And that's non-scripted. In other words, someone didn't write a script. It's just a bunch of people talking on TV. And you go off. And so is it better for people to just learn it naturally by listening to native speakers? So that's non-scripted. Or is it better for people to learn a foreign language by studying a grammar book? That's scripted. That means some teacher sat down and wrote down a bunch of grammar rules and you memorized the grammar rules. And so which is a better way, more effective way to study and learn fast a foreign language? And so that's basically the two things. Scripted, meaning a grammar book, non-scripted, meaning hanging out with a bunch of native speakers and going to parties and listening to them talking, okay? And so which do you think? And so the present study investigates the role of non-scripted video in language learning. Studying the characteristics of these two types of videos will shed light on which of these kinds of videos are more useful and more effective way to teach a foreign language. Non-scripted video provides the language learner with a more vernacular, informal register of speech. In other words, if you learn your language by immersing yourself with native speakers, you're going to learn a lot of slang. You're going to learn a lot of, hey man, yo, much faster than if you just study from a grammar book. Okay, so that's a more informal register of speech. And so when you study from native speakers, it provides dialogue not written by a teacher. It is, and so basically what language teachers do is they would go to a bakery shop and then they were going to record with the people actually there. So some customer will walk in and go, I want to buy a pastry. How much does that cost? Oh yeah, here it's 55 cents per whatever. And you simply go there and you record a bunch of people buying pastry. Then when you write your teach your language, you would say to the students, in France, this is how people order a pastry. In China, that's how people order a pastry. You know, that sort of thing, because you just go into an ordinary, that's known as non-scripted video. So you learn by listening to how native speakers actually speak. That's similar to if you were to walk into a bakery store and just stand there and listen without saying a word, okay? So that's non-scripted video. Scripted video is if I sit down and I'm thinking, how can I teach my students how to telephone someone or how to buy a cake? I would sit down and I would imagine the bakery and I would say, Mr. Smith sells cakes. He says, I am selling my pastry for 55 cents. Mrs. Smith walks in and asks, do you have any chocolate cake available? Yes, ma'am, for 55 cents. I just wrote part of a dialogue. That's known as a scripted dialogue. And teachers do that to teach foreign students how to talk on a telephone in America, how to order a meal, how to buy a cake, how to find hotel, all that kind of stuff. That's known as a scripted video. And so non-scripted video, which is a better way, just have the language teacher stand there with a camera and just record a bunch of native speakers, or if the teacher sits down and writes the language. And this is all very important for language teachers and ESL teachers. And so when a teacher writes the dialogue, you notice that all the yo man disappears, and then it's just Mrs. Smith walks in and asks for a cake. Yes, ma'am, it's 55 cents. Whereas if you actually record a native speaker, she's going to go, how much is it? Well, I don't know. Let me go look that up. And then you hear a flipping of the paper. Oh, I think it's 55 cents. Oh, and then a voice from the back of the room is going to say, no, Martha, it's 25 cents. We just made it go down or whatever. That's what you get when you're doing a natural one. It's very imperfect, okay? You're going to get in mistakes. People going, huh? Oh, no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got it wrong. I'm new at this job. Okay, you're going to get all of that when you do non-scripted. All the bloopers get in. It's actually much more entertaining when it's non-scripted, actually. So what I did was I compared the two videos, and I said, how much slang can you learn? How much grammar can you learn from both encounters? And so that's what I did, was I compared a wedding video where a teacher or a TV writer sat down and wrote a wedding versus someone went to a wedding and just recorded an actual wedding and then that sort of thing. So which is a better way to learn a language? And that became, I studied the grammar, and then I studied the social register. Like how many times did someone go, huh? And how many times did someone go, yo, man? And that sort of thing. So which is a better way? So the content analysis, that's what it's called, content. And this is still my abstract. And this, I'm telling you my methods of what I did. So this is more of my abstract. And now I'm getting into my actual science paper, my actual so that was the first, that's before the first page. Now I'm getting to the first page of my science paper, my master's thesis, which I had to simplify a lot. Believe it or not, this is a lot more complicated than what I just wrote in this little paragraph. That's what you're going to have to do if someday you become a medical writer and you want to write about the field of nursing and you want to write about some ailment. You're going to have to simplify all that medical ease for the average Joe who's not going to understand all your alphabet soup that you usually use with other nurses. Now, if you're writing an article for other nurses, oh, go ahead and say all your alphabet soup and include your original technical stuff. But if you're going to write for Time Magazine or LA Times or talk on television, I remember Dr. Fauci was on TV. And when he was talking to the other doctor about other treatments for COVID-19, he got so technical. And then he was saying all of these medical words. The journalist was sitting nearby looking impatient, not understanding anything and going, I'm sitting over here. And then after 5 minutes, Dr. Fauci turns to the journalist and goes, we currently have no treatments for COVID-19. And then he goes right back to talk to the doctor. So whatever he said to the doctor took 10 minutes, and then he simplified it to just one sentence for the stupid journalist to know we don't have anything. So yeah, when you write your nursing articles someday, you would have to simplify your language so that the average person can understand. So over the past few decades, so here I have the context and the background of my problem. So over the past few decades, the use of video and multimedia is being used to teach students many languages like French, Spanish, or Chinese. And video provides the student a window into another culture. It is this visual aspect of video which gives it an advantage over language learning from text. In other words, studying, if you're going to learn Babel, have you ever learned a foreign language using Babel or Rosetta Stone?
No, I just took 2 years in Spanish in high school.
So these days they actually have apps in which you can learn a foreign language in 3 weeks, okay? And so they also use video. And so they use a combination of scripted and non-scripted these days. So that makes my hypothesis a little bit out of date because
Although I would really like to learn languages. I've always found them fascinating anyway.
Yeah, I heard that Babbel is Babbel. It's supposed to be a really good program, and also Rosetta Stone. Those are the two top that everybody uses. So, and they use a lot of multimedia and they mix it. So you state your problem, and then scripted video is useful for students because it provides simple, modified, comprehensible input that is similar to teacher talk necessary for low-level students. In other words, when a teacher sits down and writes a very simple dialogue so that students know how to talk on a telephone in English. Let's say you're from Spain and you go, oh, that's how you say hello. You know, in China, you say, wei, wei. And in Japan, they go, moshi, 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 moshi to say hello, okay? And so when you write and you only use it for the telephone. When you wave to people to say hello, you don't say wei, because then people will look at you funny because you're not on the telephone, you see. In Chinese, wei is used only, it does mean hello, but it's used only for the telephone, you see. I remember one American got confused and actually was waving to a crowd saying, wei, without a telephone. And people gave him the strangest looks, like, you're supposed to use that for the telephone. Huh? Like, as if he'd lost his mind. But
how do you greet people in China?
You say, ni hao ma? Ni hao ma?
Ma?
Yeah, but he didn't understand. But wei does mean hello. You see, it does mean hello, but you only, so when a teacher writes I would say, hello, how are you doing? Is John, in the room? Can John answer the phone? Or those are the kind of questions I would write into a telephone conversation for foreign students. That's known as scripted video. I would not add a lot of, yo, man, hey. And then if you listen to actual people talking on the phone, some people are going to go, huh? Yeah, no way, really? Ooh, and that's known as those are known as fillers, conversation fillers. And so you get a lot more richness of conversation. Because in France, they don't say, huh? In France, they say, ben. When a French person does not know something, he'll stand around going, ben, ben, like that. An American will go, huh? Huh? A French person will go, well, anyway, you get the idea. And so even conversational fillers are different from language to language. And you need to even learn that, as well as facial expressions. And in France, ben, ben, that's equivalent to, I don't know, you see. And so even facial structures and body language that you get to learn when you learn around native speakers, just like when you were a kid, how did you learn all your facial expressions? A kid instinctively learns a language by duplicating everything their mother's face does. When the mother goes, I don't know, dear, and then the little kid is able to impersonate to the exact, I don't know, dear. You're going to see them play pretend. They play pretend mommy, and they actually play pretend you. Okay, so that's how you learn from native speakers, non-scripted. You learn all the facial structure, facial features, facial gestures, body language, slang of that language. That's one of the advantages of non-scripted video, whereas scripted video is that the teacher has to write all that in. Which is better? And so that was and I'm still at the beginning, okay, background and purpose. So the purpose of this study is to uncover the usefulness of which one is better, scripted or non-scripted. And then my research question is, what's the difference between these two kinds of videos? And then my content methods, I went over the grammar, I went over how many times you say negation. So negation, for instance, I ain't from around here, I ain't never done that before. So some parts of the country, that's not even proper English. So if you're listening to native speakers, negation, you're going to hear improper English. If I'm the English teacher and I'm writing a dialogue for my students, I will write, I am not from here. So that's the difference between scripted and non-scripted. So if you only learn from a grammar book, you will not understand if some native speaker says, I ain't never from here, and you add in the accent as well. You get to learn the accent. And so I studied the negation. I studied the verb form. Me and my friends, we went to the party. It's supposed to be my friends and I went to the party. So if you listen to native speakers, you also learn improper English, Okay, so you walk into the classroom, English classroom with me and my friends and I. So I studied the results. So I will skip through all of this. But here, materials, these were the materials that I used. These were the particular books that I used. And then this was the procedure. I looked at the transcripts of each. And then I counted how many slang words native speakers use, how many slang words teachers use. Just guess, who used more slang words, native speakers or the grammar book?
Probably the native speakers.
Yeah. Do you remember your grammar teacher ever cursing? You know, teaching you Spanish and teaching you cursing and curse every other word.
Oh yeah.
No, you'll find a native speaker that way, but you'll never hear a Spanish teacher or something cursing every other word. She would, especially if she's teaching us under 18, she'd get fired. But that's a whole nother story. So that's a difference. That's one of the advantages of listening for learning with native speakers. You get more of a richness. See, that was the results. So that would be, you get more of a richness of vernacular language, improper English, facial structures, good or bad, that go along with, I don't know, everything. So you get the whole soup of, and then when you, but when you study from a grammar book, you actually get to learn proper grammar. So you sound educational to your boss. So it actually depends on the purpose. So that I'm getting into results here. So results is that if you're a low-level learner of English, you should stick to your grammar book. As you progress higher and become more advanced, then you can go and hang out with the native speakers, and it's better to hang out with the native speakers, you see. So I said, so my results was your higher level students, you should immerse them into the country, and lower level students would benefit most from learning from a book and dialogue that's written by a teacher. And that pretty much, those were my results. And I also said results. In other words, in my results, I said, I'm going backward. I'm saying that you learn more vernacular language, informal language from native speakers, and you learn more formal language when you study from a grammar book. Those were my results. And then the implications are higher level learners can go off and learn slang because they already know the grammar. Okay, they already know the proper way of saying everything. Now they got to go off and learn the improper way of saying everything. It's the opposite of the way a native speaker does it. A native speaker learns all the improper way of saying everything first, then they go to school to learn the proper way of doing it. But if you're a language learner, you do the opposite. You learn the proper way first, then you go off and do the improper way, which is very interesting that you do the opposite of what a native speaker. So if you're going to learn Spanish, you just go up and go to a bunch of Spanish speakers who are just going to talk slang every other, would you understand anything? And jokes, would you understand the cultural jokes?
No.
No. However, if you study from a grammar book, there are books about Spanish jokes, Spanish, and you learn more or less what those jokes are about, the cultural icons of that culture. And then when they tell, like a Star Trek joke, when I was at a Star Trek movie, all the non-Star Trek fans, they just didn't get the jokes at all. Meanwhile, the Star Trek fans all laughed at the in-jokes that were in the movie. And meanwhile, my boyfriend, not a Star Trek fan, would go, what's so funny? What? It has to be explained to them. So if you're a non-native speaker, jokes have to be explained to you. If a joke is explained to you, is it funny? No. No. So then you're usually the last one to laugh. I remember I was in a movie in Taiwan. I can speak some Chinese, but I've forgotten a lot of it. So I was like the last person to laugh at the jokes because it took time for me to understand what that Chinese meant. Whereas the native speakers, they laugh instantly. And I was like laughing afterwards, after everybody else laughed. And then I had to read the English translation. Then it registers and then I laugh. So everyone stares at you going, you must be slow or something, that kind of stuff, because you're the last one to laugh anyway. So the implications of the results was low-level students should study from a grammar book and higher level students can go off and immerse themselves. And then you can read all of this, non-scripted video provides a language learner with a glimpse on how native speakers of French stops to pause and think about a question. If a language learner learned from an authentic recording, notice how I use LL and NS. Now, if you're not a linguist, you're not going to know what LL and NS was. So earlier on, I actually wrote LL meaning language learner, and I wrote NS meaning native speaker. Then for the rest of your paper, feel free to write LL, NS, NP. That was a very common mistake in everyone's papers, is they just assume that I know what a RN or an LN and all the different nursing things. When everybody writes their introduction, when I first started teaching here, and I was like, what? I'm a linguist, you see, I'm a language. That's what I studied. I studied English, and then I studied linguistics. So if you were to tell me LL and NS, and I know what you're talking about. But notice how I had to explain all of that to you, because you're like, what's an NS, what's an LL, and what's non-scripted? You're like, what? So, so anyway, and also when you're listening to native speakers, they interrupt each other, okay? When you listen to scripted people, like people in a play, rarely interrupt themselves because you're reading your lines. So one person will say, how are you? The next actor, I am fine. Let's go to the store. The next actor says, okay. For example, that would be scripted. Non-scripted would be people all interrupting each other. Oh, let's go to the, no, I don't want to go to the, you want to go to this? No, I don't want to change my mind. That sort of thing. People overlap in natural speech. And so that is one of the differences in natural and non-scripted and scripted video. And this is the kind of stuff I would talk about at a conference. So I will try not to go too far into detail, because that's not the purpose of this presentation. So anyway, you got your results in which you have more vernacular, and discussion would be lower level students benefit from scripted video, while higher level, did I just say the opposite? Lower level students, grammar book, higher level students watch television or native speaker, or immerse themselves. So that would be, and then I only did my study on French students. So conclusion would be further study needs to be done with French, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and see if that same theory holds for other languages. And so that pretty much rounds out, how you write a science paper. And then I will stop share, and that pretty much ends, this particular. Did you learn a lot about how to write a science paper?
I did. It's actually quite interesting.
Is it quite logical to you?
Yes.
It also means that when we do science, the data can change, because science, in other words, when the data changes, let's say early on, I'm getting positive results that my vaccine is effective. Then as more and more and more people get vaccinated, I start to notice the efficacy is starting to go down. So let's say in March, I will say, well, I think my vaccine is 95% effective. And then let's say by June, you're saying, no, it's more like 75%, because you've tested more and more people. And then the more people you test, the more effective, the more valid your answer is. And then you're going to have a news station that's going to try to manipulate how you think and say, well, how come in March he said that his vaccine was 95% vaccine effective, and now in June he's saying it's 75%. He's lying. That's not lying, because in science, the results are not permanent, okay? It's not like facts being permanent. In science, things change based on how, as the data comes in. That's how come right now you may think Omicron might be mild, but you got to wait a month or so in order to see, is this going to be a very harsh variant, or is this going to be a mild variant? So everything with science, you got to have patience. So just because somebody says that their vaccine is 95%, it doesn't mean they're lying when it's down the road. It doesn't mean they're flip-flopping. If down the road they say something different, okay? It just means that after they did a lot of experiments, the results change. And usually the more experiments you do, and the later results are much more, how should I put it, worthy, valid than the earlier results. Does that make sense to you? So you can't say the doctor was lying because he said earlier, how come earlier he says this and now later he says that? So don't be swayed.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Don't be swayed by saying Dr. So-and-so was lying when he said this in March. Now he's saying something different in June. Why is he changing his tune? Because, and then he's going to try to, so that's also known as media bias. So this is someone trying to swing and manipulate people's opinions based on, so whenever it's something scientific, data changes. That's the nature of science, is that it always changes, because you always have to test your hypothesis. And as everything comes out a month later, that's how it is. You can never tell. You can try to predict what the results are going to be, or try to predict, so that scientists said, we think that by winter, remember last year, the scientists thought there was going to be a huge surge in COVID, and there wasn't. It was actually a huge surge in the summertime, you see. So did the scientists lie when they said, or did they simply mistaken in their hypothesis? So that's why you have to test out to see whether your hypothesis is true or false, by waiting and seeing from the data. Does that make sense? And then you try to find patterns of, of how this virus behaves. For flu, usually for the flu is most effective, or most whatever, in the winter time, and then in the summertime it wanes. So the scientists thought that because COVID is a virus, it would behave just like the flu. So you try to find patterns. So in this case, their hypothesis that COVID-19 goes down in the summer, it does not behave like the flu. Okay, so that means their hypothesis was false. So your hypothesis can either be true or false, and you have to, only time can tell, and that's how the science works, the scientific method works. Does that make sense? That means that Fauci was not lying when he said one thing early on, when he said, Fauci said, you're not supposed to wear a mask. It's not, he said very, very early on in March of 2020, masks are not good, or something like not good. And then later he changed his mind. And that's because the science changed. And there's still so much controversy over just that one item, masks, okay? And it's, in other words, we're not gonna really know until maybe 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, when we go retrospect, whatever was effective or whatever was not effective. But, and so I'm trying not to get into politics, because that's another thing. Everything's been politicized. Even in China, in Taiwan, where my family comes from, the vaccines have also been politicized over there, okay? And so nobody wants to take the Chinese vaccine. Everybody wants to take, because Chinese means China and communism, and in Taiwan, they are a free society. And so they have their own vaccine, okay? You don't want to take the communists' vaccine. So in Taiwan, that's how the COVID vaccine has been politicized, okay? And so there's two Chinas, free China and communist China. So you don't want to take the communist China's vaccine. You want to take the free China's vaccine, which I suspect they probably have the similar elements. It's just, I think that politicizing everything in science is not healthy, whatever it is that you're doing. And I'm not going to try to take sides on whether it's good or bad to have masks or not. I just think that everybody should just stay healthy. And that's basically it. And to me, everybody, that's the one thing everybody agrees on. We should all stay healthy. It's just how we do it is where everybody argues. That's what I think. What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and anyway, this is the, do you have any other questions about your assignments or your anything else about this presentation or anything else?
So we don't have discussions this week. We just have the assignment that's due on Sunday, correct?
This week we have the week 11 forum. Okay, so next week you have no discussion. But this week you have your week 11 forum, and all you have to do is just post your rough draft to the week 11 forum.
Okay.
And then peer review. So this will be the last forum that you do for this class. And then next week you just post your final draft. So next week, no forum.
Okay, and that is considered our final for your class?
Yes.
Okay.
Final draft will be the final, and week 6, which we did that was the final draft of your first essay. That was considered the midterm for this class.
Okay.
So that's how the instructional designer wrote this class. And so that's what you, how did you like this class so far?
I really enjoyed it. I went through a little bit of a phase there, but I'm working my way back out of it. So,
That's
but
good.
I really enjoyed it.
Do you think it was the class was designed well?
I do, and I really loved, which I sent you an email once, because you had asked me how you were doing in this class as far as teaching. I really love how thorough you are with your lessons and explaining things, because online classes to me, or for maybe others, may not be as easy to some. But I found your class very, very easygoing, and I feel like I did learn things.
That's good. That's good. The whole idea to me when I teach something is I want my students to be able to apply what they learn to their real life world. I just wish that, and I want to wish everybody, wish you Happy New Year, and hope that it's not a repeat of 2020 or 2021.
I agree.
And we
Happy
get
New
we
Year.
get out of this. We get out of this pandemic once and for all, and everything goes. Who knew normal was so good? Remember pre-pandemic, we just took it so for granted, and then when it's taken away,
Yes.
did you see how many people go to an ordinary football game now? I mean, when they took it away, and not everybody comes in droves, even for a minor game, you see, because it was taken away from them last year. It was
Yes.
so weird to see all those paper cutouts. It just looks so unreal. Anyway, I hope next year we all go back to normal. I hope Omicron or whatever it's called is mild, and everything just goes, all these shots, they all go back to normal. So, oh, I was just reading, UCLA says that they have a new vaccine that's they're going to focus on the parts of the spike that doesn't change. Right now they do the vaccines on the parts of the spike that do change, and they think that would make it a longer lasting immunity or something. So,
Wow.
you know, and they got them pills too, antiviral pills. So I think that's very exciting, like Tamiflu for the flu. I don't know what the name of it is for COVID-19 though. Did you? So anyway, I hope that goes away, and I hope that you have a great and happy New Year, and a Merry Christmas. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
You too. Okay. Bye.
Bye.